works, because I've never done this before. We'll see. It says waiting for Gutsit Gibbon. But it says we're live on StreamYard.
I think that just means that we're... Oh, I do see it. It does say we're live. Hello, internet world.
Wait, hold on. Oh, wait, it's starting. Oh,
I just got a message that said we're live.
Okay, good. Okay, all right. Thank you, everyone. For
it's all magic.
Show. Gentle
Natural selection magic.
Modern apes. We're glad to see ya. Hold on, let me add Dan in here. What's up, Dan?
Hello,
Dan. Rake me over the coals. Tell me what'd you think. Did I do bad? Did Jackson do good? How did Jackson do?
So I full disclosure, I missed a lot of it because I was.
Oh my God,
in
Dan!
A different meeting. But the parts that I saw were excellent. The parts, okay. So the standout parts that I saw the Q&A. I saw the whole Q&A, I think, and then I saw the part where you were talking about like the dog groups and the hippos and the horses and like all that. Like I saw all that stuff. I was in and out for the first 45 minutes, maybe. I saw part of your intro. I saw part of his intro, and then I was
you knew my intro. So.
Yeah, I'd seen your intro before. But the parts I saw were excellent. I did hear some, at least one, like I'm confident saying there was at least one giant whopper of a lie from Dr. Anderson when it comes to the MCM6 gene and lactose persistence, and I have a screenshot to prove it as soon as I can find it here. But yeah, it was, yeah. But we should hear from people who saw the whole thing because I was in another meeting.
I think that overall, I feel okay about it. My thinking is not like, oh, just crushed him, and I don't feel like I got crushed. I feel like it was okay overall. In total, I think I did all right. I think we talked about most of the things I wanted to talk about. There were some points we didn't, and I mentioned one thing very briefly, which I think I think the way he explained it was not what it is. It was the Doolittle thing. When he says Doolittle tries to fix the genetics by saying it's horizontal gene transfer, I know exactly what paper he's referring to because I've read it. The Uprooting the Tree of Life paper is referring solely to prokaryotes. He's referring only to bacteria and archaea who are switching genes through horizontal gene transfer. That's it. He's not talking about eukaryotes like at all. And so when he said that, I immediately knew that that was a misrepresentation of that paper.
So here's something too that I want to mention, because when he brought up that Lenski 2020 paper, I was like, I've never heard about this paper. And I was like, well, I'm just monitoring the side chat and you guys were going back and forth. And I was like, I'm just going to pull it up because that does sound very interesting. And when you read the abstract, I was like, that's very intriguing. So I pulled it up and I wanted to read a quick excerpt from it because I was like, holy crap, this is just like, in my opinion, with the little that I know about biochem and genetics.
You could find it because I couldn't get a certain backdoor to open it up.
Yeah, I got it on elifesciences.org. And this is
on eLife. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so this is what I have. Kind of after the results and methodology, there is there's like a nice graph that is kind of down there for experimental design and phylogenetic analysis of the sequenced strains. And then it specifically goes on to talk about some of the evolved clones and evolved populations. And it says, quote, this collapse, which presumably occurs by homologous recombination, eliminates the citrate P expression and causes reversion to citrate-negative phenotype. The ZDBP874 clone could either be a recent or fortuitously sampled amplification collapse mutant or a representative of a rare and stably coexisting citrate-negative lineage in that population. So if I'm understanding this correctly, it looks like it is an environmental change that is causing
that's what it seemed the abstract was saying. It's just saying they're not surviving perfectly well in this one environment. And that's why when he brought it up and I looked at the abstract, I said that doesn't seem very relevant.
I have the answer for that one actually.
Dan, fill us in.
Dan.
So what it is you start off with no citrate metabolism. You get citrate metabolism through duplication of the CYT transporter into an aerobic promoter region.
Right.
And then in that particular paper, what they did is they took a sample from that lineage and put it in an environment with no glucose. Now, the thing is adapted to live primarily on glucose. Citrate is a byproduct of glucose metabolism. So it's primarily getting its energy from glucose. Now, if you put it in the citrate-only environment, now it's using a food source that is like the backup plan. You're not giving it its primary food source. Now, creationists use this to say, well, this is genetic entropy. Oh, it gained a beneficial trait, but it actually hurts it. But the problem with that argument is that genetic entropy has to be inherent. It's not context specific. Well, if you change the environment to something where you didn't adapt and then you have a fitness cost, that's not illustrating anything creationists are arguing. That's just a thing that happens when you become adapted to one environment and you change, you're not as well adapted. Like, it's not more complicated than that.
Well,
that's a fair assessment.
Yeah, that's a souped-up version of the complaint that they give so frequently with antibiotic resistance, where they're like, well, the antibiotic-resistant bacteria is actually much worse when you put it back into the original environment when compared to the pre-mutated bacteria. And it's like, yeah, dude, that's the point. Environment.
It'd be worse if we tried to live in rainforest, in trees.
Because we can't live there. We're not arboreal. I can speak to that. I fall out of trees almost every time I try to climb one. I don't have very good...
Going after Therapithecus, you're like, there he is.
Fitness is context dependent? No, I thought there was just some mutations that, according to evolutionism, would turn you into Superman.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's what I thought too, Dapper. But apparently we have all been...
Michael Behe is hitting on that very paper.
Behe commented on it? Really? Wait,
by the way, I'm here, guys.
Hi, Dapper.
Welcome.
Oh, yeah.
How did I do, Dapper?
I don't actually know. So here's the thing.
Oh my God, Dapper.
I was streaming on my channel. I was doing Kent with Bent for nearly the entire debate.
Oh my goodness.
And so I actually told my live chat, I was like, I'm not sure if I'm actually wanted for this after show, because I was asked, are you going to be here? And I was told that Erica would be very upset if I weren't here. And I decided that rather than risk the wrath of the gibbon,
I would have
pop in
and given you a stern talking to. I know the country that you live in. Keep that.
I was actually told that you would throw poo at me.
I do also want to know, RJ and TD, you guys did watch the entirety of the debate, so what are your thoughts on it?
RJ can go first.
Yeah. I think you did perfectly fine. It was a tougher road to go on because he avoided most of your argument. He doesn't know anything about paleontology, so he's just tunnel visioning in on the very specific examples. One thing where I think he made another giant blunder was when he argues that there's literally no evidence for fixed beneficial mutations in Drosophila. I think I found 3 papers when I searched on it of those very things. So that may have been another blunder on his part.
Well, I mentioned in the thing, I mentioned immediately the citrate gene became fixed in the E. coli population. Clearly it was more fit than the original. What was his response to that? Didn't he just say like, okay, or something?
Well, so
it's nothing important, basically.
Yeah, I don't even remember what his response to that was. It's all just so fast.
Yeah, he had a lot of weird deals, in my opinion, where he would kind of like gesture like vaguely at genetics, without having the specifics to show why genetics backed him up as he claimed.
Oh, yes, you're right. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. It like he gave us the HAR genes, which I will look into those later. But I think we were kind of. I did actually give 2 specific examples in my opening of different genes that are uniting groups. I gave the pyrimidine biosynthesis triple fusion, and also the one between ubiquitin and ribosomal protein S30. So I gave both of those because those are in our lineage, and they unite us with protists and fungi. And so he didn't give any examples like that. He didn't even address those. He didn't explain why those aren't actually evidence for common ancestry. He didn't really explain why morphology doesn't indicate common ancestry.
Yeah.
You're right. He did just gesture sort of generally towards genetics. He mentioned, natural selection, doesn't create anything. Of course, it doesn't create anything. It's the mutations and recombination are creating things. He didn't really address my point about why are de novo genes showing up in certain lineages, but not others. That just sort of seems like if that's like incomplete lineage sorting, but on a grand scale. And how does that work?
Well, and
How does that work perfectly?
Yeah, something that I found kind of
And
confused.
orphan genes. Oh, that was a mistake. Him bringing up orphan
Oh
genes.
yeah,
Huge. Yeah.
yeah, like the orphan genes. Okay, so how do you get those orphan genes? Well, either they're created per species, so all species are created kinds, or you somehow have just genes from a.
Well, yeah, his
ancestral-
explanation was that was his explanation, is that they're all already there. They just happen to be distributed perfectly with no overlap.
Yeah,
Just because reasons.
It was the front-loaded.
And I
Go ahead, Dan.
Between
Sorry.
you're bringing up the finches and I slipped the question in about the Ark encounter and others. It's really obvious that Anderson has never studied any baraminology.
No, that definitely seems to be the case. He was really genetics. Maybe I guess whatever research he did in microbiology was very like prokaryote specific. I guess whatever genes he was working on, because none of the vertebrate stuff landed with him. None of the stuff on dogs, horses, finches, none of that landed with him apparently. So anyway,
I want to give him credit for saying though when he didn't have the answer, because that wasn't his area. Like he knew enough to be like, look, I'm not about to traipse into talking about what I know about genetics, but that was a double-edged sword that was being used, in my opinion. It was almost a bit weaponized. It was like weaponizing your ignorance on a subject, because he wouldn't, even colloquially, even like as a layman, you should be able to say like what you were trying to do with him, Jackson, where you should be like, okay, here's where I draw the line, and it's between maned wolves and amphicyonids. Right, but he wasn't willing to do that. He wasn't willing to take that step. And when you finally did go into it, we ran out of time. So I was like, okay.
He can't apply.
I know.
It.
I know. It's interesting that he seems to think that, or that he agreed like all these different genera are related to each other, but each has its own orphan genes, and somehow none of them ended up with like any crosses over or anything like that. So
yeah, it seems like there's a lot of assumptions there. I feel like it went
one thing I thought was kind of neat about it is that it wasn't a lot of origins or bust. He wasn't going super far back. He was kind of staying in a more evolved segment of the genetic systems, and that would really be a problem ultimately if he had kept up on it, because every time you tried to press him for the boundary layers, he would back off.
Yeah, I guess that's fair.
Yeah, which brings me to my thoughts, actually, because I think you did very well, Jackson. Especially in like specific things like the dogs. Like when he brought up dogs, it was just like, did you actually prep for this debate, pal?
Well, yeah, we sort of approached this. We were approaching this. We were sort of approaching this from two completely different perspectives. I was going at here's the set of characters that unite all of these things. And he was going for, well, evolution couldn't produce these in the first place, so it doesn't matter to me. And from my perspective, that wasn't very useful, because the topic was common ancestry. The topic is, why are these things, or are these things related to each other? If so, why are they in this nested hierarchical pattern? I spent most of mine talking about I spent like pretty much the entire of my thing talking about how we can show these things are related by morphology and genetics. We almost never broached that topic again. It almost never came up, which is the topic of the debate. The topic of the debate was universal common ancestry. Dan, are you trying to say something, Dan?
I just want to show. Can I share my screen here, because I want to show that Anderson just straight up lied when you asked him about the mechanism for lactase persistence.
The end of the world if you try.
I want to. Yeah, I have a screen here. Let me see if I can. I have a screen. Erica, I think you have to show it somehow. I think you in the bottom. I think you have to click on it or something.
Okay, hold on. I am very uniquely inept at this.
Oh yeah, there's a share screen thing down below.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a slide from a presentation that's on YouTube. I grabbed this screenshot just a few days ago. I think this talk was from 2019, And he very specifically describes the MCM6 gene as a repressor of lactase. Like, he very specifically describes that is the function of the
And
drop
here he
off
said
in
he
lactase
didn't.
expression.
Here he said he didn't. Wasn't it?
Yeah, he said, he just lied to you, straight up lied to your face. Like, this is the mechanism
okay.
that he claims is the mechanism for the drop off in lactase expression.
And we read the
straight up
paper, and they
lied to
said
you.
they weren't sure what it was, but they're saying it's not blocking it. It's not blocking it. And I asked him if he agreed with that, and he said, yes, I agree. It's not blocking it, but we also don't know. And so,
I mean, well, he's got a slide right here from last year, and it says the words block gene on it with an arrow coming from MCM6. So,
oh, yikes. Okay.
I mean, maybe he's changed his mind since he gave this talk all the way back in 2019. But I mean,
that's Anderson stuff.
this is Anderson.
Yeah.
Look, that's him in the corner right there.
I think this slide actually, what Dan shows here is exactly what.
CRS.
Anderson was that entire
So
thing.
and Jackson, you were absolutely right about the actual mechanism right at the end there. There's an enhancer and an intron in MCM6, and the two most common lactase persistence alleles are increasing the efficiency of that enhancer. So they maintain the expression even as competition for transcription factors increases as you age. It's not a broken repressor at all. And not only does he say what the mechanism is incorrectly, he's lying about his own position on it.
Oh,
Well, that's interesting. So I'm not super intimately familiar with a lot of the papers he brought up. I'm not super familiar with a lot of Drosophila experiments. I'm not super familiar with a lot of the E. coli experiments, that kind of stuff. RJ and I, we covered it to some extent in Rocks, but of course we didn't get the newest paper because that literally just dropped. But even still, it seemed like it didn't really like it didn't support his position.
One of the points we made in Rocks was that the whole point of Lenski's experiments was to get a trimmed down E. coli that deliberately lacked plastids, which are the major drivers of lots of morphological change. So they wanted to get a baseline mutation rate and what you can do with like the bargain basement basic cable version of E. coli, not what can happen elsewise. So of course I'm not expecting it to develop radically new systems. It doesn't have any damn plastids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that whole thing is so frustrating because the thing is that I get the vibe very much, not to say this is particularly on Anderson, but from many of the sort of big org alpha Chad creationist groups, that they swap their position around so frequently, and it obfuscates what they actually like hold. And so when you go into a debate with them, no amount of preparation is going to tell you which Anderson position is going to show up in this case.
I put the link to that video in the chat with the timestamp to where that slide is shown in the private chat. So if someone wants to put it in the public
put
chat,
that in the live chat.
All right, I can pull that into the live chat. Or Erica, you want to do it?
Now you got that.
yeah,
Okay.
it's from January 2019.
Which, by the way, that's one of the reasons to have mods is because if you block links, which you should, generally speaking, your mods
It could be porn.
That's actually exactly why you should block
No,
links.
please not. No porn on my wholesome channel.
Uh-oh.
Well,
We just said the word demonetized.
So people like to do what's called we'll call it prawn bombing, where they just show up to a channel and they just spam links, and it gets the stream taken down. So yeah.
Big game.
Although I do know someone who allegedly got a stream taken down for sending the streamer 7 circles that were arranged to look vaguely like mammary glands.
Nope. If
That's
any
pretty
of
funny.
If any of you horny subscribers try to spam prawn in this chat, immediately.
RJ, we will definitely be covering that new paper in the recap of Rocks Volume 2.
Oh yeah.
I imagine a lot of these.
Yeah, we're keeping track of all of the post-publication stuff that we can then put into Volume 2, where we can recap all that stuff because it's too juicy to miss.
Yeah, I think there is also a sort of loss with, there is a loss with big picture sort of things, looking at saying, well, this model organism only developed in this way, therefore all of evolution is like that. Because of clearly, because that's really what happened is in these flies, or even if he were correct, which as RJ says he is not, if these flies are not indicative of the entirety of biodiversity, this one bacteria species is not indicative of the entirety of biodiversity. It's lots and lots of different experiments that have been done, which, and even in the ones that he did talk about, clearly he misrepresented, or he just sort of hand waved them, like the E. coli example, because the promoter region was duplicated then moved. Because that, you gotta leave.
Yeah, I'm gonna call tonight. It's late
Bye,
for me.
Dan.
I'm getting up early.
Right, Dan.
See you
Bye,
all soon.
Dan.
All right.
Love you.
Bye,
Good night,
Dan.
Dan.
But yeah, with that example,
Who was that guy? Sorry.
right? I think he knows Erica, but
okay.
with kind of going like, okay, well, here's a couple of, like here's a couple of model organisms, and here's what happened. So therefore, all of evolution is like that. Well, no, because either they weren't testing for like speciation event, they were just testing for some single mutation or some single gene or something like that. In the case of E. coli, I just sort of hand waved it, and so I asked him, and that's why I brought up the example of the feathers. I brought up feathers because the gene that regulates feather development, and his response was just that you're assuming that they're homologous. That was his whole response. What is that paper, RJ?
Another new paper that we'll be putting in the volume 2 just came out a couple of years ago. Multiple regulatory modules are required for scale to feather conversions, where they're experimenting with crocodile placodes to determine what components are coming up that relate to feather evolution. So I put into the live chat, yipes, Anderson is way behind the curve on the feather thing.
So
You have to send that to me, RJ.
That's the weird thing, though, right? Because he's behind the curve on that, and yet he was ready with that 2020 Lenski bacteria thing. Like, I don't know why he's coming into a discussion on universal common ancestry without, like, even the slightest look at the macroscopic side of things. Like, why? I don't know where
he could very well have prepped. He could have riffed off of Michael Behe just a couple days ago on this, because it's that recent. I'm sure they monitor an awful lot of this material, and so that's why it might be prepped in his mind because of the apologetics.
Wait, RJ, you're saying I must have missed.
That's why I want our side to be faster than they are.
So Behe was the one who came out with this analysis on the the death spiral.
Well, I'm sure there are probably people that I suspect AIG and ICR have as well. I haven't checked that aspect yet. They often pounce on it. What you find out is whoever was the earliest is probably the one that everybody is riffing off of, because there's no doubt about it that ICR and AIG monitor the stuff that's going on outside of their frame over at Discovery Institute and Uncommon Descent. You've got somebody like Sal Cordova who has a foot in both camps. You got Paul Nelson. You got quite a few in there. So there's an awful lot of backgrounding in the same way that we do backgrounding on that stuff. But yeah, the fact that he brought it up means, he's pounced to do the little gotcha bit on that because it fits the narrative. And I get him points for proficiency in pouncing on it, but that doesn't mean he's still got a good argument when you look into the facts.
Well, did he bring Lenski up, Jackson? I can't remember. Or did you bring Lenski up?
I believe he brought it up because he was hand waving the fact that it was a promoter that got duplicated then translocated.
That checks out.
And
whenever
Lenski has been misrepresented by all camps in this area.
Yeah,
it's kind of interesting. Oh, sorry.
Whenever I listened closely, all I got from Anderson was dishonesty, vague creationist tropes, and personal incredulity.
Well, I'm always hesitant to call someone dishonest, but
like what Dan said, the lactase.
Okay,
exactly
that's all right. That's fair. But I mean, for the most part, I do think there does seem to be a lot of incredulity, because he just he seemed to kind of, or when I told him about the duplication events, it seems like these gene families, they share significant homologies with other gene families, to which he just kind of goes, you're just assuming. Well, we can see that they're homologous, and we understand that that populations split and they accrue, and even by his own position, populations can split and accrue mutations in different genes. It seemed at one point that he was saying, and this is something that is kind of interesting to me, because you have mutations in different lineages, even under genetic entropy. You have mutations, right? Novel mutations, like in every organism. Okay. But according to created heterozygosity, all the variation already exists. So is it that the mutations that occur never create new variation? I kind of wish Dan were here. I would ask him that.
You got a problem there. And,
Yeah.
and I don't anticipate Anderson or Jensen or Tompkins or Sanford, any of them ever, to get to the point of a work as detailed as Gould's Structure of Evolutionary Theory or something on that magnitude, working through the nuts and bolts of existing organisms and what genes were in the original progenitors, what bottlenecks they went through the flood.
Right.
They're never going to be able to get there because the data's never going to fit.
Let me do that right now. Dappity dip.
RJ, I have a slightly on topic question for you.
Yeah.
How many creationists have you heard who claim that Adam is Y chromosome Adam, even though it should be Noah according to their model, or what passes for a model?
Oh, I don't think they realize the problem.
Well, if they do realize it, to stop and correct themselves now would make them look worse in the eyes of their.
I don't know that anyone thought it through that in that level of detail. They're just kind of mushing it together. All of them, I can't think of anybody offhand, and if anybody has, let me know. I don't know of anybody that really thinks through the implications other than the blood types for what was going on in the Noah part. That when they're talking about the human gene, they're inevitably talking about Adam and Eve back 6,000 years, and then just don't bother me about any of the further details, other than Stamping for Truth that likes to bring up the blood haplotypes. That one tropes around in there. But other than that, if anybody knows anything beyond that, let me know, because I'm not aware of any.
Yeah. Well, it seems pretty obvious that Noah would have to be Y chromosome Adam, but they're like, oh, look, we traced Y chromosome Adam back to 6,000 years. It's like, well, then that's a problem, because you should be tracing it back to 4,400 years ago, not 6,000 years ago.
That's an excellent point.
Yeah.
No, why is that so rarely called out? That's a great point, Dapper.
I don't think people really think about it, because the flood story is usually not talked about in the same context as just like creationists seem to have like a split personality about it. Like they talk about the creation and created heterozygosity and all this crap that doesn't make any sense in the first place. But then they have to realize that, okay, but 2,400 years later, you need to have a reset, and a hard reset at that. So however much heterozygosity, quote unquote, was created, you only get as much created diversity as you can fit into two of
it isn't even that. It's only like 1,600 years.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I'm just doing the math wrong. I'm sorry. So in 1,600
and then you get into the really hilarious thing. We've got a new piece from Andrew Snelling where he actually has a chart that we're going to be describing in the new book, where he's got a chart of the stuff that's going on with the mammoths after the flood. That all the elephants and mammoths and mastodons are occurring after Noah's Ark.
Yeah, which is the position AI gene.
And you're going,
what do they do with things like Gomphotherium and Platypelodon?
And do they really think this through?
I think,
no, probably not.
honestly,
Implicitly, yes. And yet, they're not going to talk about that. I'd like to see them tackle Gomphotheres. Holy moly.
Exactly.
Oh, go ahead, Dapper.
I was going to say.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
And that's why. Do they tend to say that, like, Gomphotherium?
That's why it's so important to get the creationists to talk about it.
All right, but RJ, do they think that like Gomphotherium and like Platypelodon, or even like the Serenian side of that branch, because Serenians and elephants are basically sister groups at this point? Like, what about things like Pesosiren and things? Are those post-flood or pre-flood, according to what you've seen?
Oh, poor Snelling ain't anywhere near far enough into it to do that. They just pick off the mastodons and mammoths because those are flash frozen in the post-flood cataclysm, and that's about as much as he wants to do with it.
Okay, so
he's
screw
in
all
the
those
same
other
way that the
Gomphotherians.
Tower of Babel just gets plopped down as a little icon on the chronology without thinking, the language distribution, how does it get to Oceania? Where the Americas come in? What's going on?
I so want to have that conversation.
He's opening up cans of worms without realizing.
I so want to have that conversation because
it's the data that
I was going to say, if you look at the modern distribution of language families, right, there's no way that they look like they radiated from a single point. It very much looks like these language families developed more or less in situ and then spread out over the course of the last 10-ish thousand years or so. That's why you get Indo-European languages where they are.
Remember, they focused tunnel vision on Indo-European. Of the discussion that I've seen, and again, if anybody knows, but for all practical purposes, they tunnel vision in only on the Indo-European language family because that's the one in which the Semitic languages are nested. So they have to pay attention to those, RJ, but forget completely all the Nahuatl.
Semitic languages are Afroasiatic. They're related to languages Egyptian.
Okay, I stand corrected on that. But anyway, that region.
But the thing is
that region of what I've seen them discuss, if they don't get any farther than the Indo-European family.
Well, that's probably because YEC is almost entirely restricted to the Anglosphere, right? And
almost entirely, at least the brand that we experience.
Yeah. Right.
Except for Adnan Oktar, would you?
Well, so we get a few people in the Turkic group, and I don't remember exactly which language family Turkic belongs to.
Haranyaya. Lovely. Where's the evolution means?
Oh goodness! But the thing is,
he's just a parasite, so it doesn't affect.
So since YEC is almost entirely restricted to the Anglosphere, and the only exceptions that I know of with any following are basically in Latin America, where North American missionaries have made some headway. Basically, everyone who's a YEC, their first language is Indo-European. Almost everyone. And even when you get to the Harun Yahya type, the Islamic creationists tend to be way more agnostic on the age of the earth. So they tend not to care because the Quran is far less specific.
This happened because of the mutation that occurred early on. When Harun Yahya started out, he was just willy-nilly copying creationism. He was pulling stuff from Dwayne Gish and all that. That was like 1999 or so. But he very quickly must have realized, that's a leaky boat. So he deliberately kept away from all of that. So as far as I know, all of the apologetics that occurs in Harun Yahya land from that point on are basically channeling intelligent design, Michael Denton style anti-evolutionism, riffing material off, and then other creationists will come in and copy off it. On the language matter, the one area that pops up just peripherally is Chinese, because occasionally you'll find some creationists arguing that certain Chinese glyphs supposedly are representing the flood and Noah and Adam and Eve and that. And it's usually some very conservative, not really linguists who kind of construct a folk entomology of version of Chinese. But other than that, the whole history of China and all of the domestication of rice and pottery and all the other cultural traits, they don't care a rat's ass about any of that.
No. Well, plus the Chinese civilization predates their supposed flood date, so they can't go too far into that.
No, that's what I was going to say. It predates the supposed flood date and carries on its merry way up to, through, and then continuing after with not the slightest blip in their calendars, their census, data, whatever.
And their Chinese flood legend can directly be connected to actual river flooding.
Right. Well, that's the thing, is the Yangtze floods every once in a while.
And worse, it's relating to a failure in water management. The actual flood legend amongst the Chinese is talking about a terrible flood that comes along and wrecks their irrigation systems. And the emperor is just pissed ass mad to this. And he's down dressing the bureaucrats that have let everything fail in there. And then there was one little guy that survived because of all of this stuff. But it's basically an Owens Valley river management TVA flood failure issue. So it has nothing whatsoever
it's not at all worldwide.
Our story is a very different tale.
This is an ancient Chinese.
It's funny to see how creationists misrepresent that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, any
Follow the
myth,
sources, damn it. Read the
any
originals.
myth
It's
involving
hilarious.
a flood is obviously a worldwide flood that killed literally everyone, except that when you look into flood myths, oh wait, no, that's actually not all of them. There are actual flood myths that involve explicitly local floods.
The interesting bit about that is when you, and you know, my civilization experience is very limited to Egypt, just because that was the civilization that I took in for my cultural and take a civilization.
It's the cool one.
Yeah, it's the cool one. Everyone likes mummies. You know, we all like the animal-headed gods. They're like the proto-furry.
There's a reason that Rome has so many
all the damn monuments. Everybody knows about that. They're superstars.
Yeah, this is this is a civilization of people that live right by a river and they don't have a flood myth, and they're also super close to basically all of those Mesopotamian civilizations where that cultural diffusion passed the flood myth back and forth, but it never crossed into Egypt. You know, so I find that very curious. Like from an
I actually have a good hypothesis about that, right?
In what's the word I'm looking for?
Enlighten you?
No, not
hypothesize away.
Elucidate.
Elucidate. All right. By the way, those both mean enlighten etymologically, so you know.
Okay, Dapper. I like how elucidate sounds. So, yeah,
fair enough. So here's the thing, right? The Nile basically never floods catastrophically. So what happens is every year, because the Nile has so many sources, it tends to basically kind of average out how much snow melts to produce additional floods in the Nile. So they have the years where it floods a bit more and a bit less, but it's always predictable when it's going to flood. And the degree to which it floods never varies by any crazy amount. And so the flooding of the Nile was predictable. And so rather than trying to control the flood, the Egyptians just built their towns and farmlands to take into account how much flooding was likely. And it was so predictable that they could actually plan, based on astronomical observations, how many days it was until the flood would reach high water.
The dog star rising. What about ready to come?
Right. So it was so predictable. Whereas if you look at, say, the Tigris and Euphrates or the Yangtze,
when they do. Well, the Harappa culture, they were another one that had disastrous flooding.
RJ,
they were very dangerous. In the case of the Babylonians,
RJ, you need to turn your video off. You're loud.
Sorry.
There you go. Sorry about that.
Poor RJ. Stop bullying RJ, you guys.
I'm not bullying him. I just want him to be able to keep track in real time, because it's clear that that's not what was happening.
I know. Yeah. I don't know big mug to worry about.
So, but So
anyway, the Babylonians and that was it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep bullying RJ for Rocks Volume 2.
There you go.
And you can bully him.
But yeah, these other locations, they did have catastrophic flooding. Like if in ancient Mesopotamia, if you didn't correctly keep up like your section of the berm or dam or whatever you want to call it near the river, allowing it to catastrophically flood, that was a crime. You could be punished severely because, you know, I don't know if you know, but the Code of Hammurabi wasn't exactly soft on crime.
Can we also point out? So I did also want to point out that clearly Anderson had been reading Stephen Meyer.
Oh,
that became apparent to me during our debate. Because he referenced the 1960s symposium on mathematical challenges to neo-Darwinism. I don't know if you guys caught that.
Well, he could have got that from a variety of sources. That Wistar thing has been a trope in intelligent design literature going way back, and also in creationist literature. So there's a whole bunch of little smorgasbord tables he could have got that little item from.
Okay. Well, I remember it because Meyer brought it up in Darwin's Doubt, and he also bangs the drum more recently on that. And it's just interesting that's not what the symposium was about. It wasn't that the mathematicians were saying evolution doesn't work mathematically. What they were saying was there are so many variables involved in evolution. We're having a difficult time predicting or making mathematical models that could predict certain things, which when you're talking about like random mutations, of course you're going to have problems modeling it.
Jackson, the thing that goes along with that.
Well, you're getting the same thing with that Royal Society meet.
Yeah,
today.
the thing that
they're doing exactly the same thing as they did with Wistar.
Right.
Yeah.
What were you saying, Erica?
I was saying the thing that kills me with that is when creationists will also turn around and apply that logic to the odds of life forming, which it's in my opinion, this is rude Erica mode, but it's very asinine in my opinion to even try to assign probability to something that has so many different variations upon variations
Absolutely.
that go into it. It's
Absolutely.
ridiculous. You can't apply numbers to that. And in the same way that you can't apply numbers to the likelihood of finding life on another planet now because of one, sample size, and two, the number of things that just go into it. I mean, come on, you guys. I thought these guys were supposed to be math lovers.
Well, no, both Anderson and I agree. Math sucks. Don't do math. Do biology.
Math makes nerds.
Although the theoretical biologists all harumph us, probably. So
look, math turns you into a.
And they want to get the meta level in, and do a surprising amount on that. Looking at how once you have a data field to play around with, where you have organisms, you have data points on fossils, you have characteristics that could be quantified. And remember, cladistics does that up the yin-yang. You can start applying meta-analyses to look at larger term things to find out, for example, how successful are lineages that have a lot of morphological plasticity, how successful are lineages that are herbivores versus predators or particular kinds of herbivores. And then so they can find layer on layer on layer of things, then that can connect that up also with biogeography, with resistance to climate change. And there's an incentive on modern scientists to look into it for that very reason, because they want to try to figure out what we're doing now, and are we exceeding the parameters of what gummed up the works in previous mass extinctions? So it's not a trivial issue.
Right.
Yeah, I think, a lot of it too that I've been seeing out of the creationist community is taking thing that is just a type of evolution but doesn't specifically have the word evolution in the name and being like, see, they said that this is the actual reason. Like the Podmurkuru lizards is a great example where it's phenotypic plasticity. And they're like, you see, it's not evolution. It's just phenotypic plasticity. Or, look, it's epigenetics. Right. It's not evolution. I mean, it's like looking at someone with a first degree burn and then being like, on second thought, maybe these are more second degree burns. And someone's like, I told you he wasn't burned. It's like they're know the chart.
Yeah, that is a fair analogy. It is always they do that. What's his name? Long story short, does that, and of course, he's getting that from the ID group. It's like if it's not pure 1940s neo-Darwinism, it's not evolution. It's like, sorry, sir, we've moved on. And I think I actually made that point during our debate. He talked about Fisher's calculations, and so I asked him, had anyone done anything since the 1930s? We're not in the neo-Darwinian synthesis anymore. I
mean, that's the thing that kills me too. We're getting citations like on the newer end that are typically, the mean is like the mid 90s. And you're like, all right, guys, you get one person that'll cite something from, the 2010s, but typically it's very quote mined to death and ignores entirely the fact that within the very paper, they're like, hey, like we were talking about this the other day. It's like, here's the problem. Here's what we think the solution might be. Here's how it's supported by, I don't know, stats. And then a creationist goes in there.
Yeah, one thing I liked from a methods point of view that was revealing is that in the discussion about the only thing Anderson could bring up that Jackson or one of us wasn't already familiar with was that very latest Lenski paper from 2020, that so many of the topics that he tried to stick onto the field, Jackson was already familiar with them and so could respond in detail. Like I'm going, oh no, do you really want to bring up the chromosome 2 fusion? No.
Yeah, I knew that
run.
Oh my God.
Wait, he brought up chromosome 2?
Yeah.
Yes, he did. And I crushed him on that one. He had nothing.
He denied chromosome 2 fusion.
Jackson,
okay.
You know what really did
if there's anything in there that I feel like I adequately responded to it, it was that bit, because he mentioned it and he said, I'm not really convinced. And so I pointed out that I responded to everything he said relating to that, the fact that there's a telomere specific pseudogene family right next to it. I went on everything about it, and he was just like, well, I don't believe it. And so clearly
the study. He was just accept apologetics, probably from Tompkins and company, who
Yeah.
are the main point people on here, who have been insisting that there's nothing there, and he simply accepts what they say as gospel, and he ain't going to move off it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the thing. I'm not going to assign this to Anderson because I don't know him well enough, but very frequently I get the vibe that creationists will try that out on someone. They will get a tacit and systematic response for why the human chromosome 2 fusion is indeed excellent. They will brush it off, say it doesn't matter because it occurred in the human lineage, therefore it doesn't have any bearing on the common ancestors between
Well,
humans.
it's a loss. You
Yeah.
lost chromosomes.
Yeah, and then
There you go.
here's
That's less
the weird part.
information, Jackson. Information equals chromosome count.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
they go, yeah, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter anyway.
Yeah, those chimpanzees
someone
have
new.
more genes than we do. Chromosomes.
Drives me
Well,
crazy.
it seems like he accepts. He's all about. I did mention the phylogenomic study on duplication of genes. It seems that he's okay if it's something local. He's okay with it. Like he was okay with the duplication of the promoter in E. coli, right? Because we know what it looked like before, and we know what it now looks like after. But for some reason, he's just and so clearly he accepts this, right? Even though no one witnessed it directly, it happened somewhere in this. This mutation occurred, or set of mutations occurred at some point, which now has resulted in this novel phenotype. But no one witnessed it directly. And the same was true of the duplications that gave rise to the feather from the scale. The same regulatory networks are controlling this. Well, no one witnessed that directly. What's the difference? We're using the same system, the same principle to say that, well, this promoter came from this region, they're homologous, to say that, well, this gene family is homologous to this other one. In principle, it's the exact same method. We're just talking about a different time scale. And his only response to that is, well, you're just assuming. Well, sorry, that's kind of the whole argument. If you can't really explain what the difference is, then you don't have an argument. You can't split these things into Barrowmans. You have no dividing line.
I am comfortable making this very, very broad generalization, just putting it out there, but I have never encountered or read of a creationist that has any kind of standardization for any of the methodologies that they claim support.
There isn't. The papers that give sort of the broadest overview on baraminology, like Gene Leitner's Mammal Archives paper, literally only says, and I wish I'd brought that up, it literally only says if it's the family, we accept it as a baraman. However, the example where she splits bovinae, which is the subfamily of cows, from caprinae, which is the subfamily of goats from antilopinae, the subfamily of antelopes. The reason she separates all of those, and RJ and I drew big attention to this, was she says people tend to think of them as being different, therefore they're probably separate kinds.
Common sense is the guide to science.
That's
Common
literally
sense
what she says.
Science
She literally said
about that.
That's so scientific.
The cognomen literally comes down to, it kind of makes sense to me, so we'll go with it.
Yes,
my God.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the cognitum.
Can we appreciate? And I'm really.
It's the People's Choice Award for system.
What
were we saying, Erica?
It's feels over reals. This whole thing is feels over reals.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Like,
it absolutely.
Oh my God.
Yeah, because there is no systematic
Dapper,
thing, and that's also what I said.
The reference to that Wu paper on scales. You
did. I'm gonna have to put that into my Google. Also, here's what I want to know. What do creationists do with Antilocapridae?
For Antilocapridae, nothing really.
Do they ever talk about the pronghorns? And why aren't they in the giraffe kind?
Oh yes. Yeah. Why are they? Well, they're outside of Giraffidae, so they're not part of the giraffe kind. So there you go.
Barely outside of Giraffidae.
Yeah,
Hey, don't you know a family is like an actual thing? It's not just
though.
like a
You
taxonomic.
could just
Which he
call
also
it-
said. He also agreed to that during our talk. But any time that I tried to get him to say two things are related, he would say, "Well, I don't really know." There was at no point that I could actually get him. Okay,
Yeah, I don't know.
Wolf was the literal only example
Wolves,
where
but foxes.
yeah.
Well, yeah, and even then he was like, I don't really know. Okay, that's fair. No one's an expert in everything. Okay, fine, fair enough. But like dogs from wolves was the only thing we could actually get him to agree on. He couldn't agree on species within the same genus for literally anything else, which
Wait,
I found
are you kidding me?
astounding.
He couldn't agree to like Canis lupus and Canis rufus or Canis latrans or Canis aureus or anything like that.
So what
He was like, I'll agree for the sake of argument. That was his response.
Oh, you would have lost him there, Dapper. His
Dapper.
eyes would have glazed over.
Yeah, Dapper would not have been happy because the odd thing about that is that his justification for accepting dogs and wolves was motioning at the genetics, which is the
Right.
genetics that pairs and indeed dictates the lineage of the families of every other example Jackson presented. It doesn't make
But
any
no.
sense. Standardization.
Okay, but here's a question.
He can accept meters and yards. He can't accept miles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He pretend that Canis coyotes was a species because Kent pretends that even though it's Canis
No,
latrans.
He didn't say that. He just kind of said, because I mentioned, I was like, what about the maned wolf? And
Oh, that's pretty far outside of Canis, though.
but he said he agrees. He said he agrees with that also, though.
He thought the maned wolf was related to Canis.
He said all wolves. He said all wolves are related.
Yeah, all wolves.
But the maned
All of
wolf
them.
is farther away from Canis than Canis aureus.
He said
Canis aureus.
all wolves.
But they look
All
doggy.
wolves. So
I mean, they
yeah.
look like dogs on stilts, I guess.
Tall dog. Tall
Yeah,
dog.
well, you know,
Tall
it's-
doggo.
Dapper.
It's big boy doggo.
Dapper.
Yeah.
Dapper,
Leggy boy Jackson.
Runway dog.
Leggy boy.
Leggy.
He's got legs for days. Yeah.
Superficial surface features over genetics or actual morphology.
Well, to
every
be
day.
fair,
We're going back
to
to,
be
the
fair,
19th
he did say-
century.
He did say the genetics. He did say he believes on the genetics that they're all related. So again, as Erica said, he does motions to the genetics saying that, okay, they're all related because of the genetics. But then I say, what about the genetics that connects Vulpes to Canis? And then he goes, well, I'm not really familiar with the genetics. So it's like,
And he's never
Yeah.
going to become familiar with it.
which is
either.
it?
Jackson.
It's
That-
okay until he's not explicitly familiar. No one's going to become explicitly
Yeah.
familiar
You
with
can't
every
apply it.
genome. I
Wouldn't
mean,
that
for
be
goodness
nice?
sakes.
Wouldn't that be nice if we could all be familiar with every genome?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Man. Genome woman.
I want it.
Genome
I'll make it
person.
happen.
You know what? You can have it. There you go,
We're
Erica.
gonna have the
Yeah.
future where we're just uploading that right into the spinal cords of every human.
But it was interesting because he kind of.
But the
because-
thing is Anderson is illustrating why creationism can only go so far and then it bogs down because there are fundamental limitations to how they can actually apply stuff. He's functionally being baby origins or bust, wanting to know where a particular orphan gene came from, but yet never applying it to his own model. If he was a serious creationist with a serious structure, they would have come up with a meticulous model which they can apply at the drop of a hat. And if you ask them about, well, you could go to so-and-so and they've done a wonderful analysis of why foxes are or are not related. No, they don't have any of that. And they're never going to do it.
No.
Yeah, to
They really
do so would be to have to tacitly admit
I don't know if
the methodology.
it was on Standing for Truth's channel. I don't know if it's going to be like uploaded tonight because it's almost an hour later and it's still not uploaded. I don't know if they're like adding
No,
things to the beginning.
He
Did
waits.
they add things to like the beginning and end? Did they like make an intro and stuff?
No,
or-
he posts it the next day. It's like an additional draw to the channel. It's smart marketing.
Oh, okay. Well, fair enough. Okay. So
Yeah.
sorry, Dapper. You have to watch it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Craven commerce.
F.
But yeah, no,
Chat.
I really, it is interesting that it's like they sort of want species to all be separate from each other, but they know that they won't get that because people are too familiar with the concept of speciation. And so
Yep.
they kind of have to pretend that, okay, yeah, a bunch of species are all related to each other, but yeah, who really cares? And that's
Yeah.
kind of what it seems to me.
Don't probe and ask which one because
Well, it's the other bottleneck. Because if you look at the difference between young Earth creationism and old Earth creationism intelligent design, that you can see that the irony of it. No intelligent design advocate, zero, no old Earth creationist, zero, ever works out systematics in any way, shape, or form in any example at all. If there are no counterexamples.
No.
The only people who do the baraminology attempts, blundering, half-assed creationists, and why? Not because they're any less creation-y than their intelligent design forebears. It's because they got the goddamn Noah's Ark to work with.
Yeah.
If they could have, you imagine the Earth is billions of years old, you could have as many species created, and you don't have to bother about it. But they've got to book Noah's Ark, and there is a limited number that they've had to whittle it finally down to only about 1,500 kinds. They can kind of fit those in, but that means they've now got a double bottleneck of figuring out fossil life and the post-flood speciation, and it's a mess.
So RJ, it's not just that, but in addition to that, they're constrained by two things, in my opinion, as far as their genetics and their terminology goes. It's Noah's Ark, and it's humans being specially created, because there's no way to stand. Like I said earlier,
That's nailed it.
Yeah, you can't standardize it and keep humans out of the hominoid.
Yeah, it would have been easy to get.
Well, I mean, look, if the maned wolf,
easy to get kinds organized if they gave up on humans being a specially created kind.
Yep. But here's the thing: like, if the maned wolf and Canis are a kind, then there is absolutely no way to say that Pongo and Homo are not the same kind.
Yep.
I do not care. If
we're pulling
double standard alert.
We're literally pulling the Gibbons in at that point.
Right, like the maned wolf is about as far away from Canis as you can possibly get in Canada. It's not quite like, I think Kuan is slightly farther away, the Dole.
Yeah.
But I'm not even sure about that. Like, even if that's not true.
Those are so cute.
Doles are cute. But like,
my last time I checked, maned wolf was considered the furthest, like the least close to gray wolves, basically.
Well, there's a whole bunch of things that are in that genus that are sort of South American and like island populations. So that whole population, I don't remember what it's called. I can double check it.
Of what? Actually, what are we talking about? The population of what? What island?
So the maned wolf, they're about as far away as you can get.
Deucecion avis. They're on the Falkland Islands.
So there's a few other ones too, but yeah, the Falkland Islands. I'm double checking.
Also, Darwin went there and was like, the wolves on the west islands look different from the ones on the east islands slightly. They have like darker coat coloration.
Aww.
He was like, isn't this curious? Look at this wolf I just killed. It was the last of its species.
Yeah. Yay. Throw another party.
The creationists got into the same problem with the horse barrowmen, because although Wood and Company had it going all the way from Hierarchies to Equus, the more finicky creationists are going, oh, if we go all the way down to Hierarchies, where do we draw the line? Cadre of young Earth creationists who try to keep Hierarchies out of the horse barrowmen, because they realize precisely the problem that's going to come in with the Phenacodonts and Homo galax and all those other little parasitacles.
Well, I tried to ask him. I tried to ask him about that at one point. I tried to ask him about if because you have like Hierarchies and you have the ancestors of the rhinos, and I said, well, throughout rhino evolution, you have ones with horns, ones without, and he said, doesn't that describe the ones today? And I said, well, there are none today like Paraceratherium. And I tried to get him. Yeah, these gigantic like.
You might as well have been speaking Klingon. It was way over his head,
guys.
Hey, RJ, Klingon Horbejatlach.
Nobody
Which
else.
is Klingon.
Yeah, well, that's easy for you to say.
Nobody speaks Klingon.
But here's the thing, right? So if you include things like Hierarchies, right, which is, I mean, at what point do you exclude things like Rhinoceroididae? Because the absolute earliest horses are almost completely indistinguishable.
I brought that up. Yeah, I brought it up. It was just the teeth.
They all look like a little animal that you would find as a petting zoo critter.
Right. They're about as different as like the gray wolf and like the jackal. Like there is just so little difference between these animals.
Yeah. But I need to interrupt because Just a Walking Fish in the live chat, I recently found some papers about Latimeria that demonstrated that the two species in the same genus are 43 million years apart, and one species has two populations with a 13 million split.
That's the exact opposite of what I had seen recently, because the papers I had seen that the two modern species of Latimeria were only like 3 to 4 million years separated, something like that. So I don't know. I'll have to look that up. I'll have to become familiarized with that.
Yeah, we need to. Yeah, that I said send it my
we'll
way.
want to get the sources on that.
We want the paper. Give it.
Give us the paper.
Yes, link it.
We want it now.
But yeah, so the other thing is,
And the shrubbery.
I've seen instances of like baraminology techniques, because baraminology is basically like 1920s evolutionary biology cladistics. It's basically all it is.
Yeah.
They're taking
They got little boxes with blocks in them.
right. They're taking the cladistic science of 100 years ago, and then taking species sets that are extremely restrictive based on their preconceived notions of kinds, and then trying to figure out, what's an
And they
outgroup.
flush a bunch of data down the drain, too.
Oh, yeah. But the thing is, and correct me if I'm wrong, RJ, but there are people using baraminology to put humans in hominoidea, and using baraminology to put babies.
The Australopithecus sediba had characters that screwed up their analysis.
Yeah, that was
got
Todd
Wood
Wood.
in a
He did
lot
that.
of trouble.
Oh yeah, Sediba is made up, right?
No.
Right,
Wait, hold on. I want to make a comment on that, because I think I understand where the discontent is coming from on the Sediba as an artificial species creationists, i.e., Standing and Company. And because they call it a mix of human and ape bones. And I was saying this to everyone in the Twitter conversation earlier, but I genuinely think, and I hope one of them will correct me if I'm wrong if they decide to watch this after show in its entirety, but I think they genuinely think that each of the bones belongs to either one or the other, rather than the reality, which is that the entire skeleton has a large percentage of bones that are mosaic. They don't resemble one or the other.
Mosaic. Yeah. Oh, they don't like that concept, Erica.
I know. It's
Terrifying.
They don't like mosaics at all. I would expect
For a debate about universal common
medieval basilicas, because they just have two mosaics.
I think if I were to sort of summarize the debate in one sentence, that it is this: for a debate about universal common ancestry, surprisingly little of the debate was about universal common ancestry.
Oh yeah, like Jackson, the most egregious thing Anderson said in that entire debate for me was when he said that genetics disagrees with homology and morphology.
Then why is like every geneticist an evolutionist except you? So
seriously, do you not know what Hox genes are?
No,
no, they don't.
At one point, he was. Well, some of them think that cows and humans are more closely related than chimps.
No, that was in reference to a specific HAR.
Yeah, HAR, human accelerate. What is it? Human accelerated. Region or whatever.
We'll be looking.
So, I want to point out something.
I'm curious about those.
That I know of, a bit of Orange, who's a fairly mainstream sort of AIG-ish guy. He rejected the existence of Sonic Hedgehog because he thought it was ridiculous that it was named Sonic Hedgehog.
You can't be serious, really? Actually, Dapper, RJ and I talked to him one time.
Yeah. Did you really?
We had a stream on my channel. We spent like 3 hours trying to explain to him literally the definition of evolution. 3 hours. It took 3 hours, and he still never got it.
That's
his big shit. So I actually
still never got it.
I have like a 3-part series on my channel. It's fairly old, but it's called "Eating a Bit of Orange."
I've watched
it. It's literally me going through something about him talking about the definition of evolution, and he gets it so badly wrong.
Oh my god!
That's actually
because he says it's,
in my opinion,
because he says it's statistics or something like that. He goes like, RJ dropped. That's no more. But he says a bit of orange is that like, it doesn't matter. The alleles in this population don't matter. That's just statistical data.
That's what evolution is.
Yeah, no, he never got that. We could never get him to accept that, and it took us 3 hours. And at the end of it, we were like, He's gonna be a creationist forever. Who cares?
Hey, Stupid Horror Energy is in the chat, which I want to say, I'm sorry if
demonetized.
Drew doesn't like your name.
Also, I gotta say, I'm a little bit disappointed that James has more or less gotten used to saying "stupid horror energy" because it was so much more fun when it made him uncomfortable every single time.
Yeah, as she likes to be called.
Right, exactly. I loved it so much more when he visibly cringed every time.
Oh my
But
god.
That's great.
he's near to it now, and like, oh, I loved it so much more when every time he said, "And we have one from," and then he would physically like cringe down and like stupid horror energy.
Oh, I love it. Yeah,
Great.
when I saw Stupid Horror Energy had sent in a super chat, I was like, "Is standing?" I was like, "Oh, standing! Like you're gonna have to read these ones." Like,
Oh,
yeah,
hey, Erica, listen to this. HAR2 includes HACNS1, a gene enhancer that may have contributed to the evolution of the uniquely opposable human thumb, and possibly also modifications in the ankle or foot that allow humans to walk on two legs.
oh, for bipedality, we do have a
That's
very
on-
long thumb.
It's on the Wikipedia. That's on the Wikipedia
For
page.
AKR 103.
All right,
For
but Jackson,
HAR2. This is HAR2.
how do you explain that my right thumb is double jointed but my left thumb isn't? Checkmate, evolution.
God.
Checkmate.
Uh,
Eber
I-
card.
This was just, man, I think overall, I think it went okay. You know,
No, I think
yeah, I think it went good.
I don't think I
yeah.
got crushed. I think it was okay.
let's
You know,
give
when you watch it tomorrow.
yeah, let's
Oh, you know what Jackson, you know what I just realized? He brought up drops. I can't say the name right now. Flies. He brought up flies and Hox genes. By modifying Hox genes and flies, can't they make antenna grow where feet are?
Yes, they can.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
okay, but that's just dealing. You're just talking about like things that already exist.
Yeah, that's the same
I guess
information.
he hand waved the entirety of gene duplication, which I thought was intriguing because they also claim it like doesn't happen in
Yeah. The weird thing to me is like, evolution. They seem to think that evolution proposes that entire new functional genes with that produce highly adapted proteins just should appear randomly, just out of the blue, inserted into the genome. But the thing is, no, that's not what evolution predicts. There's this whole thing, and yeah, okay, Slade Chimera, I don't really have thumbs, but whatever. Just
she's got a point. Got a point.
Don't
I
talk
guess
about
they weren't. I think the reason I couldn't find it is because they're not called HARs in other animals. They're called ARs.
ARs. Okay. All right.
Accelerated regions, not human accelerated regions.
But
I
the thing is-
just found a paper about it.
evolution isn't. It's basically not stupid like that. Like the thing is like, okay, yes, we can have duplication events, which then the duplicated gene can mutate, and then once it gains a new function through a mutation, if that function is advantageous, it can then be selected for better versions of that gene, better alleles essentially in that environment. And we have multiple instances where we can take exact genes and we know they were duplicated because we compare the genome to closely related species, and so closely that even creationists usually wouldn't object and say, hey, this is duplication. It's actually an extra segment on the genome, and these mutations result in new functionality. Things like antifreeze proteins in Antarctic fish that were duplicated from other proteins related to like oxygen transport, if my memory serves. And
Yeah.
say,
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is.
It's still the same kind.
but that's the thing, that new function on a gene, that's essentially an entirely new gene after you go through those few steps. That is the creation of a new gene. And when creationists are like, oh, how do you get the new information? It's like, that's how. That's exactly how.
Yep.
Yeah, there was virtually. I mean, there was well, as you saw, or well, you didn't see, but as the others who saw,
Well, yeah.
well, we never. There was no discussion of phylogenetics on his part. Just
No.
none.
No.
No. His whole shtick is here are a couple of examples that I can either misrepresent, as Dan showed with the lactase persistence one, or I can just ignore, like the E. coli one. There was no discussion of phylogenetics on his part, and he just kind of harumphed anytime I brought up homologous gene families or here, this is homologous between these two things, he just harumphed it, didn't care whatsoever. Anytime he just got to a point where he just kind of was like, sort of eyeballing it or eye hearing it, whatever, earballing it. He would just kind of be like, yeah, I don't care about that. And that was kind of where we went. That's how it came down. There was no real pushback on anything. It's just, I don't care.
Well, we're at about 1 hour, 10 minutes.
You're right.
We want to go ahead and give closing thoughts and let everyone out of here because I know these after shows are the goal going forward is concise. I mean, would consider this quite concise. Because I don't think everyone necessarily has the time to stick around for much longer. But hopefully in the future, I do enjoy this, and I think that the people who kind of tune in, the wonderful 50 to 60 people who have been here throughout this. Enjoy these conversations. So maybe we can do them outside of the context of the debate at some point and go for a bit longer if we so feel like it.
I'm open to it.
Book club.
Yeah, I want to say thank you. Yeah, I think it was okay. I think that the original debate was fine. I'll post that whenever it gets uploaded, or I'll mirror that, I should say, whenever it gets uploaded, which will be tomorrow. So remind me to do that. I don't really feel like the case for creationism was strengthened at all by that. I think he's hyper focused on a couple of examples, even one which, as we saw, he didn't really represent very well, or just didn't really care. But I thought it was fun. It was interesting to talk to him. It was interesting to get his perspective on it. He's the third creationist I've ever talked to, and he's the first one of the ones I've talked. Third from AIG, and he's the first one I've actually talked to who has an actual degree in this field. Mike Riddle didn't, Dave Wetzel didn't, and so this was interesting. And he gave me a couple things to think about. I did bookmark a few papers. I don't know if anything that I said he'll ever think about again. Probably not. So, but at the end of the day, this isn't really about me. It's not about him. It's about the people sitting on the fence who are watching this, who are trying to make up their own mind about it.
In economics, you call that the marginal actor. So there's always this idea where there's this guy who might buy a pack of hot dogs for like $6, but he won't buy it for $7. Right? Those are the people who you always have to reach in a debate, is the marginal actors, the people who are really close to going one way or the other. Because
oh, sorry, Dapper, continue.
I was just going to say, because your interlocutor, he's not going to change his mind.
Yeah, it never does work that way. And the type of people that are fence sitters are usually the type to seek out conversations, like this, and like Jackson's conversation with Dr. Anderson and sort of that genre, in order to see how people kind of hash through their ideas. That's why we all do this, is because the conversation may not matter to the other person directly, like you said, Dapper, but it's all of those people in the middle.
Yeah. And I also want to say real quick, hey, every single person who is here or who has been here in this stream, they have YouTube channels where you can get more content about creation, evolution, and debates about biology. Look for all of us. I believe Erica's going to be posting our channels in the description in the future. So go look at all of our stuff. So Jackson has great stuff. T-Lane has great stuff. Obviously, you're on Erica's channel, so she has great stuff. RJ has great stuff. I have decent stuff. We'll just say
ridiculous.
That's Beck Evo modeling stream earlier on Tap Hats Off. Excellent.
Oh, that's true. I do have a second channel. If you want to see random crap from me, like gameplay, doing arts, reading Dracula out loud.
I cannot find. I have been looking for the past several minutes for the paper that he said. What is it? HAR 81 is like the same, or it shows that elephants are more closely related to like chickens. I cannot find anything on this.
No, he said drilling
down
on that concept.
I think he probably got secondarily.
Because he said HAR, and I cannot find this I cannot find literally anything.
Jackson, I wrote down the specifics. It was HAR 101 for humans being similar to cows, and HAR 81 for humans being similar to chickens. And wait,
he said like I thought it was like 103 or something. But no, I was it cow? Anyways, at any rate, he said like elephants are more closely related to chickens, according to one. He said humans are more closely related to cows. And I was like, is it a coincidence? I've never heard of like any of these before, and I can't.
I was thinking.
And I can't find anything on it, and so I'm like, I don't know what papers.
No, Jackson, that's why I point blank asked him right afterwards, and I want to be very clear. Dr. Anderson is he seems to be a very kind and compassionate person. He was absolutely. He was a delight to interact with. But
he's a very nice guy.
I wanted to drill down on that and get specifically the ones he was talking about, because I was like, I've never heard this. I have never heard of this.
Well, I want to add one thing. If you look at protein sequences, right, you can get weird similarities. Like the protein.
I can't even find the name of this protein.
Crested between bats and dolphins is literally identical because they both echolocate.
Yep.
But if you look at genome sequences, that falls apart because while you might have identical proteins that are heavily selected for, you can use synonymous codons to get the same protein. And once you start looking at synonymous codons, suddenly your close relationship kind of falls apart. So I've heard things like, oh, humans are more closely related to chickens for some proteins if you look at the protein sequence. I've heard that from creationists. It's like, fair enough. But if you look at the genome sequences for those same proteins, suddenly humans are closer to chimpanzees than they are to chickens.
That honestly may have been it. But also, like, I'm looking at the human accelerated regions first described in 2006. This is apparently like pretty recent in terms of genetic or in terms of genes. And that may be an instance where this is happening, where the chicken and the elephant have the protein, which is very similar, but the actual gene is extremely different. That may be, but also there's HAR associated genes, and it only goes up to 47.
Yeah. So I think that's what it comes down to is like, if you do protein sequences, you get weird results. That's why protein sequences aren't what we rely on when it comes to phylogenetic.
For phylogeny, yeah, you're right.
You rely on genome sequences because if you look at selected for proteins, you get weird stuff because sometimes certain proteins have to be selected for different things in different lineages based on their different environments and whatnot. But the genome differences aren't going to match the alleged quote unquote phylogeny you would get out of protein sequences. The only time you should use protein sequences is if you can't get genome sequences. So, for instance, there was a Homo erectus protein sequence that not too long ago got sequenced, and they were like, "Oh, hey, that's cool. That sort of gives us some genetic information," and it does, right? Because a protein sequence can only result in a finite number of genome sequences that can produce that protein. Great. But if you have both genome and protein sequences, why would you ever go with protein sequences? Oh, that's right, because you're an academic fraud and a creationist, which are basically synonymous.
That drives me crazy as well. Neff does that, but that is a conversation that is a dead horse to beat to death another time. All right, guys, and I'll give the last word, I guess, before we end the broadcast, if that's all right with everyone. Jackson, I thought you absolutely killed it. I think that it's going to be a very enjoyable task for us to look into these HAR genes, so to speak, and I think that we'll also be looking into that to Lenski's new results out from Lenski's lab, and we'll just be seeing what we think. Who knows? Maybe I don't know. Maybe there'll be like a video on it. We'll just
there'll be a couple of videos on it.
Yeah. So, but in the meantime, everyone out there, gentle modern apes, thank you for showing up, and we're going to be doing more live streaming now that I'm not actually scared of it anymore, and that's
because I taught you how.
Yeah.
Yay!
All right, and with that, we're gonna end. So bye, everyone.
Bye.